Welcome to episode 235 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing writer-director Ryan Bellgardt, who just did a film called The Jurassic Games. Ryan is a filmmaker living and working in Oklahoma, so it's another great story about a guy who's far from Los Angeles. We talk about his career running a production company in Oklahoma and how he has been able to use that experience to produce The Jurassic Games, which is his third feature film. So stay tuned for that interview. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking or sharing it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on the blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 235. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I teach you how to write a professional logline inquiry letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. Quick few words about what I'm working on. As mentioned over the last couple of weeks, The Pinch, the crime thriller feature film that I wrote, directed, and produced last year, is, at least for a limited time, available for sale on the website. Just go to www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/thepinch, and the word The Pinch is all one word and all lowercase. I'm going to keep it up for sale on the website for a couple of more weeks, and then I will be rolling it out to iTunes and Amazon after that. Also, for just an extra $5, you can bundle the film, The Pinch, with the 3-hour webinar that I did making the film. I go into great detail about every aspect of the production, the writing, everything about this film. Writing the screenplay, raising the money, producing the film. So this is a great chance to see the completed film and also see the behind the scenes of how I actually made it. So again, if you'd like to check out The Pinch, go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/thepinch, and of course I will link to it in the show notes as well. In terms of my own writing, I'm going to finish doing the rewrite on my kids' animated show. I've been talking about that one over the last few weeks. I did a draft, got some notes last week from my writers group, and so now I'm just implementing those notes. I should be done that, within the next couple of days, and then I'll start sending that out to producers. I mentioned that I've been doing some rewriting on the kids' live action mystery show that I wrote earlier in this year. I'm still waiting to get some notes back from a producer on that project, so I think I will be spending some more time on that in the near future, but just have not heard back from that producer yet. And then I've been talking with another producer about possibly producing the low-budget sexy thriller that I wrote over a year ago. And the intention with this script originally was to sort of shoot it low budget, like The Pinch, maybe a little bit of a bigger budget, maybe try and get a little bit of cast in it, but basically kind of just do what I did with The Pinch on that. So I've got a producer I've been talking with about that. So hopefully over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to start jumping back on that project, really tightening up the script. Script definitely needs some work. I never really polished the script up as well as I thought it could be polished up, just because I was sort of waiting to see where it was going to land in terms of production and budget and these kinds of things. And that's going to be a lot of the rewriting. The script right now, I think, is it's like 100 pages or 105 pages, and I've got to get it down to like 90 pages. So there's a lot of stripping on that, and then there's definitely some character moments, some story beats that probably need a little polish as well. So I'd say that's kind of my big assignment that I'm going to be taking on writing wise here in the next couple of weeks once I get some of these other things out of the way. So lots of rewriting, I would say, is in my near future, and this is kind of a good sign. You just always want to polish these scripts up and polish your work up, make it as good as possible, get it to the point where you feel confident sending it out. So lots of rewriting on these projects in the next couple of weeks, and then we'll kind of see how all that lands, and then hopefully I'll be able to start to get some of these things into production. So that's what I'm working on. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I am interviewing writer, director, producer Ryan Bellgardt. Here is the interview. Welcome, Ryan, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So to start out, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get interested in the entertainment industry?
Well, I'm from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. I've lived here my entire life. And I started wow, it's been about 20 years ago now. I got into the radio business and started doing morning radio. And I really kind of got my start writing for that, writing a lot of comedy skits and things like that, and learned from a really talented mentor about that. And that kind of grew as I went into more production side of things. I started getting into video production and I got into 3D animation and things like that. And so fast forward 20 years later, and here I am now using kind of all of those skills that I learned to now write and direct movies.
Mm-hmm. And you're still in Oklahoma City right now?
I am. Yeah, we're based in Oklahoma City.
Okay, perfect, perfect. What would you say was sort of your first foray, making that transition from radio into film? How did you make that? What were those steps? What did those steps look like?
Well, I went from radio into television. Because that those worlds kind of live together, you know. And I had radio clients that were asking me to do television commercials for them. So I started doing, I picked up a camera and figured it out and started doing television commercials. And from there, I got involved in a company called Bowling Point Media, which is my company now that I'm currently the president of. And we just started doing all kinds of video productions for, corporate clients, television commercials. And then we ended up doing, I'm a little bit out of order, but I know it doesn't matter too much, but we also ended up doing some interstitials on television, on a local television channel. We did a thing where we would host the Saturday night movies. And so we would write and produce little 5-minute kind of interstitials that would go on kind of like a dinner and a movie kind of thing. And then from there, we asked the TV station if they would let us do a half-hour special. And they did. And so we ended up doing half-hour kind of narrative specials that would go on it was funny because they would go on during the holidays when the news team didn't want to work or couldn't work. So they would just throw on and then it was cool because they gave us no restrictions other than it had to be appropriate for broadcast television, but we really did anything we wanted to. So we ended up writing those things more like little movies. And we did one that was nominated for a regional Emmy. And then we did another one after that won an Emmy award. And we were just like, I was like, wow, I mean, this is like really fun. I love doing this. And I think that from that point, we had done a lot of video work, but I had a friend of mine that named Josh McCamey, who is now the director of photography on our movies. I saw a movie he made with a friend of his for a very low budget, but it looked really, really good. And they had done it on DSLRs. And I was like, I think I can do that, So from there, about 5 years ago, we made our first movie, which is Army of Frankensteins, which I wrote the screenplay for that one. And then we went on to make Gremlin, and then we went on to make Jurassic Games, and now we're working on our fourth one. So it just kind of snowballed from there.
Mm-hmm. So as you're starting out your career in radio, were you on the same sort of commercial side where you were producing? So it was very technical. You were like producing audio commercials for clients.
Yeah, that's correct. And even during that time, I had a little home recording studio in my house. So I was very much involved with the technical side of things. So I did learn a lot of the technical side of producing stuff, whether it be radio, music, even, and then using my same. I always kind of say it uses the same muscles in your brain to kind of move from that to then producing video or CG animation. Even to me, it was just like I wanted to create stuff. Mm-hmm. And any way that I could create stuff, whether it be audio or visual or whatever, was very appealing to me. And I just loved doing it. I love the process of doing that.
Was there anything in the back of your mind that, hey, I love movies, really I want to do movies, or was just a very much an organic process of just slowly going along and realizing that you're in a position to do movies?
I think everybody loves movies. I mean, I grew up loving movies and have been influenced by movies more than I can probably even imagine. Honestly, I imagine myself being a film composer. Like, I love music. I went to school for music, and I thought that I would maybe, if I was in film, it was always kind of a dream to be a film composer. And when I found myself organically in the position to direct movies, I thought to myself, well, okay, I can be a film composer now because I'm making my own movie. I can hire myself to be the composer. And it turned out that was just way too much work and a terrible idea. And I found a great composer named David Hamilton who came in and kind of taught me a really valuable lesson inadvertently that, I need to be able to surround myself with people that are better than me at all this stuff, and then the movies will be a lot better, rather than trying to do everything by myself. Mm-hmm. So that was cool, and it's been really fun working with David. And he kind of showed me that yeah, I had no business trying to be a film composer when guys like David are out there who are really, really, really good at it, you know.
So one of the things that I noticed, your three movies, Gremlins, The Army of Frankensteins, and now the Jurassic Games, I mean, they're very much sort of genre pieces, and they feel, and I'm not even sure who the distributor is, but is it Uncorked Entertainment, I think, at least did Gremlin, correct?
Correct.
Like they feel like that type of a movie. How did you know, living in Oklahoma, how did you even know, like, came up with an idea like Army of Frankensteins? How did you know that would even be marketable? Or how did you even know that that was something that would be possible?
We didn't. We didn't. I mean, I think a lot of this business is definitely hard work and perspiration and inspiration, all those things that they say, but it's also luck. And I think we had kind of just like there was something in the water or something, because when we came up with the idea for Army of Frankensteins, we were joking around a little bit with our buddies here, and we were saying we were thinking of the Twilight books, you know, and we were like, oh, you know, an army of vampires. And I said, or somebody said, you know, you never see an army of like the lumbering old classic Frankenstein monsters. Wouldn't that be funny? And then one of the other guys said, oh yeah, throw them back into the Civil War or something. And I'm like, whoa, you know, what, you know, so we just kind of like, it was one of those dumb ideas that just wouldn't die. We kept having ideas to go with it. And I finally had, you know, 5 or 6 pages of just like notes we would write down at lunch, until finally I was like, yeah, I think I can write this into a story, into a screenplay. And I did. It took me a while to write the story, and I kind of used the note card method of like, you know, planning out scenes, and I had an outline and stuff. And then the screenplay itself didn't take that long. And then once we got into that, we just said, hey, you know, we're going to make this thing. And we did. My company at the time, Bowling Point Media, I was in charge of the production team here. So we just kind of decided in our nights and weekends, we would scrounge up the resources to put this thing together. And we did. So when it was in the process of being made, like I said, we just kind of, it's a terrible pun, but lightning sort of struck. And there was 5 or 6 other Frankenstein movies that were being made around the same time. I think, you know, I, Frankenstein, Victor Frankenstein, Frankenstein's Army, there was a lot of them. And people were starting to mention those movies. And they would mention ours too. I remember an article in Fangoria about all those movies, and they mentioned ours. And we were just like over the moon, like, wow, you know, this is great. They're talking about Frankenstein. We got really lucky. And then because of the buzz around that stuff, sales agents started to reach out to us and said, hey, do you have anyone representing your movie? And, you know, we didn't know anybody anywhere outside of Oklahoma. So we were thrilled to be able to hook up with our sales agent now, who's still with us, High Octane Pictures and Galen Christie. They did a great job of helping us sell Army of Frankensteins. I learned a ton about the business side of filmmaking from that experience. And when it came time to make Gremlin, I was like, hey, what can we make that will really knock their socks off from a buyer's perspective, like a distributor, you know? And so we worked together with our sales agent to come up with the concept and the script and the, you know, story of Gremlin, and the kind of stuff Gremlin had in it was appealing to buyers. And then we amped that up like times 20 on Jurassic Games, where then High Octane came to me and said, hey, we want to make a dinosaur movie with convicts, and we know our buyer's going to like that. We've been doing surveys. We've been talking to them. They want dinosaurs big time right now, and pitch us stuff, you know? So I then came back and said, okay, well, here's a couple of ideas. Here's an idea about dinosaurs and convicts. And they're like, no, that won't work in this territory. And I was like, I was kind of starting to lose a little bit of heart, because I was like, well, I don't know how to make this idea work in a way that I love the idea. You know, I liked it. I thought it was crazy, but I always wanted to add one more thing to it. It's kind of like, yeah, there's an army of Frankensteins, but an army of Frankensteins in the Civil War, that's like where I'm, you know, and I wanted to do the same thing with everything I make. So it was kind of like adding that extra piece. And I remember coming up with the idea of what if the dinosaurs are virtual? What if it's a game and they're trying to survive in a game? And what if it's kind of like The Running Man, where it's a dystopian future and they're on television, and, you know, death row inmates are now being executed on TV, and it's controversial, and the way they're doing it is this outlandish game show where they're having to survive against dinosaurs. And I remember thinking that, and I remember thinking I was going to pitch that to our sales agent, and him say, nah. And I pitched it, and they were like, oh, that's great. I love it. That's a great idea. You know, you've got Ready Player One coming out, which you got so it's tied in with all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And so once they kind of gave me the okay, you know, then I just started writing. And a guy named Adam Hampton, who also plays Anthony Tucker in the movie, he's a great actor and director in his own right. He went with me many nights to Buffalo Wild Wings over the course of about a month or so, and we hashed out this Jurassic Games story. So I really like his writing. He's kind of in the local scene here, known for very good dialogue and very good like character development. And so that was something that I felt I was a little bit weaker at. But I felt like I could do fun and action stuff. So I brought him in to help me, and I think that the result of that is a Jurassic Games that might be a little deeper and more complex and has a little bit more layers to the story that I think people are seeing it now and they're kind of like, well, I thought this was going to be really stupid, but it's actually kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. So let's take a step back. That kind of ran through the three films. Maybe just to start out, in case people don't know, maybe just give us a quick pitch to the Jurassic Games. Do you have a log line for that you can just give us?
Well, I do, but I'll try to remember it off the top of my head. It's basically in the near future, 10 death row inmates must survive, a deadly game show featuring, dinosaurs and each other. Mm-hmm. Whoever survives gets their freedom, and all the rest will be executed, by lethal injection. I mean, that's basically the gist of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and the other question I had is, again, just looking at sort of your resume of films, they're heavy, especially for low budget films, they're heavy on special effects. Were you doing special effects in your commercial and industrial work? So you had some sort of a background and knowledge of this and know what you could do on a budget?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, we did, about 10 years ago, I started learning visual effects as just a hobby, just because it was something that I really thought was the ultimate playground. I mean, you could have a blank canvas, and literally, if you knew how to use that software, you could make anything you could dream up. And that to me was the coolest idea. So I started learning it just in my free time. And it took me a long time. I mean, it took me literally 10 years before I felt anywhere confident enough to be able to do something like Gremlin, which was our second movie, which featured about 150 shots of a CG character. Even then, I had to hire someone to help me to do the animation. And we hired a girl named Stephanie Roach, who came in and did all the character animation, because I just wasn't very good at it. But still, going through that movie and doing all those visual effects shots gave me the confidence and the understanding on how to do it. And then when it came time for Jurassic Games, we hired on 3 or 4 more kind of specialist people that could help us do all the visual effects shots. And then Jurassic Games was about 700 visual effects shots. So it was really a lot it was ambitious and a lot of work, but the team pulled it off somehow. It's a miracle, kind of.
Yeah. So let's talk about your writing process. You just described, it sounds like you're just sort of spitballing ideas, and I guess with Galen at the Buffalo Hot Wings. So you're coming up with an outline. Once you have a solid outline, how long does it take you then to write up the script? Are we talking a week? Are we talking a month?
Man, I wrote the Jurassic Games script in 3 days.
Huh.
And it was because my outline was really pretty much the script. The actual like going into final draft and formatting everything really didn't take me very long, because all I was really doing was tweaking a little bit of dialogue or coming up with some dialogue. But like really every single scene had been note carded before that. So the technique that I like to use is that we will spitball the ideas, and it always starts with like, okay, this is 1 page or 2 pages of just random thoughts. And then as we, have our meetings wherever we're going with whoever I'm writing with, we'll just, like you said, spitball ideas back and forth until I've got enough of those ideas that I can start formulating a plot or a story. And then it takes quite a bit of time. I mean, I probably spent 3 or 4 months on just doing that stuff until I figured out that, okay, I'm at the note card stage where I start with maybe 20 note cards and then hitting all my main beats. And then I start filling in note cards. I might have had like 40 note cards I try to make them kind of like each scene gets a note card, but obviously there's a lot more scenes than 40 scenes. But this one with Jurassic Games was so kind of like, we spent so much time in that phase of it that when I actually sat down to write the script, it only took me 3 days. And I was kind of at the end, and I was kind of like, once I sat down, I didn't really get up for 3 days. But still, it was very quick. And then I wrote that first draft, which I kind of, consider a vomit draft anyway. And then once I sent that over to Galen to look at, he starts to kind of go through and redline stuff and change stuff. So I'm not so worried that my first draft needs to be perfect or great. It just needs to be there, and it just needs to get from point A to point B. And then we'll go in and we'll change it. And we probably went through 3 or 4 revisions and drafts, and maybe revision 4 was the one that we ended up shooting. But I think by the time we had done this many movies and this many scripts, I was very aware of writing only what I needed. And writing scenes that I was kind of editing the movie as I was writing the script. to make sure that the movie was really, really, really tight. I just didn't want anyone to ever say, well, it's kind of slow and boring. And that's issues that I had with the previous two films where, especially, Army of Frankenstein's ran an hour and 50 minutes. It was just like, it's 20 minutes too long, And I think and Gremlin I tried to make Gremlin tighter and tighter too, but even parts of Gremlin, people criticized about being slow. And I was just like, there's no way Jurassic Games is going to be slow. It's not going to be. So I just, did everything I could to, in the edit, make it as tight as I could, so much so that I was worried the movie was going to be too short. There wasn't a whole lot of stuff to cut out when we were trying to, make it tighter. So it was a really fun movie to write because it told the story could have been told from a few different perspectives. It could have been told from inside the game. It could have been told from the point of view of the producers, and it could have been told from the point of view of someone at home watching. And so it was fun to sort of pick the different moments that would be told from when and where. I was a little bit worried that the movie would end up being choppy or hard to follow because we're weaving in and out of these different places that the story can be told from, and we're weaving two storylines together, which have to kind of come together at the end. And I think when I saw the first rough edit of it, I was like, oh, well, it actually works pretty good. So I was pretty happy because I was worried that it was going to be very choppy and hard to follow.
Yeah. So you keep talking about this team and having these meetings as you're developing the outline. Maybe you can describe who is in those meetings. Obviously, Galen, you've mentioned him, but who else is sort of part of this team, this development team that you have?
Well, I've got the key guys on my team are Josh McCamey and Andy Swanson, who have been with me from the very beginning. And those guys do, Andy does a lot of editing and coloring, and Josh does the DP work and camera work, and Andy does too. But those guys have been instrumental in just being idea guys with me from the very, very beginning. And they were my writing partners on Army of Frankensteins, and then and through Gremlin. And then Jurassic Games, they were more involved with the production side of it. And on the writing side of it, it was more Galen Christie, who was the sales agent, and then Adam Hampton, who was the writer. He also was the lead actor in the movie, but he's also a writer and local director. And he was the guy. The three of us, Adam and I, were the ones that did most of like the throwing stuff against the wall and coming up with characters and all that stuff. And Galen was there to just sort of like anytime I had notes or updates, he would sort of guide me through that process. And what's great about Galen is that, he's so in touch with what buyers want that it was very easy for him to see a flaw in our script that would be like, hey, avoid this because certain territories don't like this. So, we're making a sales movie that is hopefully as appealing as possible to every territory that's out there that can buy movies. But me as a writer and as a filmmaker, I still want to make this not just some kind of cookie cutter thing. I want to make it interesting, and I want to tell a good story. And I love genre movies. I grew up on Hollywood blockbusters and stuff like that. So I'm not trying to make a bad movie or a B movie. I want to make the Avengers if I can, but I don't have the same kind of resources. So I'm doing the best I can to make a Hollywood type movie, an action, fun, adventure, popcorn type movie with a small budget. That's gonna be perceived as a B movie no matter what. But I'm really proud of that. Those core guys on the team plus everybody else that works on the movies kind of believed in Jurassic Games so much that they kind of gave everything into it. And so to me, it kind of feels like something that ended up being a little bit better than the sum of its parts. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm curious, is Galen in Oklahoma, or this was like via Skype or telephone that you were
Yeah, Galen's he's based out of Los Angeles. So
okay. So it wasn't in-person meetings with him.
Right. Well, there were. I mean, he comes and visits us sometimes, or I'd go out there sometimes. But mostly it's telephone. Like I would send him a draft, and he'd be on the plane, and he'd read it, and then he'd call me. And it's kind of a joke I kind of made about Gremlin was that he would call and say something like, "Oh man, I read the script for Gremlin, and I just love it. It's fantastic." And then for 2 hours, he would tell me everything he wanted me to change about it. But still, he was great, and he. And I listen, man. I want his input. I want other people's input because I don't think that without it, these things would be nearly as successful as they are. So.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm curious too. You mentioned that he would often say, "This isn't going to fly in this territory, and this might fly in this territory." Can you give us some specifics on that, like some specific examples of things that maybe you were thinking of putting in the movie but had to dial back because it maybe would hurt the sales potential? I think that would be fascinating for screenwriters to hear.
Yeah, well, one that I can think of off the top of my head is we knew that we wanted to kind of like with Jurassic Games aim for Asia because Asia is a huge Japan and China are huge markets. And so we were coming up with a scene at the end where I thought it was pretty just, okay, well, let's have them eating takeout at the end. It didn't, they were eating something. It didn't matter what they were eating, but I thought, oh, this will be a nice little nod. We'll just have them eating takeout. And I thought, but you know what? I'm going to call Galen and make sure that there's nothing weird about this or whatever. And so I called him and he said, oh, I'm so glad you called me, because whatever you do, I think it's a good idea to do takeout. Whatever you do not have the chopsticks sticking just into the rice, up out of the rice. Huh. And I was like, okay, why? And he goes, I'm pretty sure that's some kind of bad luck, like symbol for death or something like that. And I was like, okay, well, they won't do that, you know?
Yeah.
So there was that. There was also like, I think in my script, it was the 15th Jurassic Games. And he's like, well, can you make it the 8th Jurassic Games? And I'm like, yeah, it didn't matter. And he said, yeah, because 8's a real lucky number in Japan. So it's like, it's stuff like that, like, you know, there are things that I'm always told to avoid. And they're cultural things like that you wouldn't really think about. Like, I've been told that like time travel is something to avoid. So there's no, even though our first movie had time travel in it, but I didn't know at the time, but, you know, time travel in Asian countries can be considered taboo because of their religious beliefs and things like that. So time travel, like anything like resurrecting a body from the dead, really a lot of stuff that was in Army of Frankenstein's was taboo in Asia. And so Asia, it didn't do very well in Asia. So that's why I said, okay, well, I'm going to make my next movie where it has the best chance to do the best it can in every territory. So I'm going to avoid certain things. You know, and then it just the types of people you cast, you know, kind of matters. And, you know, it's good to have like some diversity in the cast to kind of represent, you know, some of the other territories and things like that. But I mean, yeah, it's weird stuff that you would never really think about, like stuff that's good luck or bad luck that American culture just doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. And was there anything sort of the typical stuff like language, nudity, violence, blood? Are those ever conversations that you talk about with Galen?
Yeah. Yeah, oh, absolutely. You know, for Army of Frankensteins and Gremlin, we're going for more of an R kind of rating as far as like the gore and language. I asked him about nudity because I don't really have any issues with it, but I said, you know, do you think we need it? Do you think we don't? And he said, I personally am not a fan of it unless, you know, it serves the story or there's a reason for it. And he goes, I just say avoid it because, you know, why give them something to censor? You know, and the same kind of goes with gore. You know, if something's over gory and they have to censor out 20 minutes of the movie, you know, then they're not gonna buy it in, say, the Philippines. I know there was a scene in Gremlin that was a scene of the creature coming out of a character's stomach, kind of like Alien, you know, and I thought like, well, I mean, I did the best I could on the CG on that. Doesn't look very real, but here it is, and it ended up being edited out of the movie in the Philippines. And I was like, why? And they said, oh, because they just thought it was for censorship. They just censored it. And it like didn't, I mean, I remember with my 8-year-old son, like he was helping me work on that scene and he was like, that doesn't look very real, Dad. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but it's the best I can do. So it's like, it's funny to me that they censored it in another country. But again, with Jurassic Games, we were going for more of a PG-13 and just kind of like, again, broadening our audience to the most possible territories and people that could watch it. So, you know, there's not much language. You know, I don't think we've done nudity yet in any of our movies, and it's not because we're against nudity. It's just because the story's never called for nudity.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah. So, what does the relationship look like between your company and High Octane Pictures? Is it for this particular one? Did they finance the movie? Do they give you a minimum guarantee, or is it just more based on the relationship that you have with Galen?
Well, it is based on the relationship we have with Galen, and Bowling Point Media is my company, and we're basically a production company. So we could like turnkey a movie. If you had a script or a budget and an idea, we could then, even if you didn't have a script, we could take your concept, and if you had the budget, we could completely turn it into a finished movie. That's what we do here. Mm-hmm. Galen is a sales agent and distributor, so you know, he sells movies to different territories, including domestically, and then they also have the ability to distribute their own movies, which they're getting into more and more. And so our companies sort of just have partnered up with that relationship, and we've worked together enough now that he trusts us to be able to deliver on budget and on time, and we just have a very close kind of friendship and working relationship. And with Jurassic Games, they financed Jurassic Games and came to us with a budget, you know, and said, here's what we want this movie to be made for. Can you do it? And we were like, no, but we'll try. And, you know, so that was kind of it's kind of what happened. And I think the investor is very happy. Galen's very happy, and we got the movie done on time, so that makes me very happy.
Yeah, yeah. And it seems like, too, one thing that kicked off this whole sort of relationship with Galen was somehow getting the Frankenstein movie listed, as you said, these other things. And you're in Oklahoma, and I'm just curious, as you said that, I was thinking, how did you get, like you were on some sort of Fangoria or something listed with these other Frankenstein movies? How did you even get your movie out there enough to even be listed? Do you have a publicist or something that was out there trying to do something? How did you even get listed with these other
Galen
movies?
told me, well, we were on IMDb. I mean, I just put the movie on IMDb and on IMDb Pro. And I know Galen, and what those sales agents do is they will just kind of scour IMDb for things that are fresh on there. And if it fits what they're looking for, they'll reach out because they're looking for content. And if your content is fortunate enough to match what people are looking for, which Army of Frankensteins was crazy enough and had the Frankenstein thing going on, that I was approached by 3 or 4 sales agents at the time. So it was just strictly IMDb. I know that as it was starting to pick up a little bit of buzz with our trailer that we made, we were starting to get more inquiries on our Facebook page. We had a Facebook page too that people would reach out to us on, and I know our distributor ended up being Shout Factory for Army of Frankensteins, and they reached out to us on Facebook. And so. I mean, I know people have a lot of, I talk a lot about this, and people have a lot of hard time like saying like, hey, how come my movies, I'm trying to give it to everyone and no one seems interested. And I kind of keep thinking to myself, well, if you're making what they want, they will find you, That's the trick though, is how do you know what they want? And I think having a relationship with a sales agent who's got a lot of connections with buyers, they're daily talking about what they're wanting, and it changes all the time, like, sometimes they want Westerns. Sometimes, or, a year ago, they didn't want anything to do with Westerns, but now they're saying, hey, you have Western, so it just changes, and you have to sort of be ahead of it. And, they're really good at predicting trends, or, if you know Jurassic World is coming out this summer. So they're like, hey, dinosaur movies are going to be hot. Everyone's going to be talking about them, and we're going to do a dinosaur movie too. So that's kind of why Jurassic Games happened. So I'm thinking, what's my advice for someone out there trying to write and get their stuff, discovered or work or done, produced? For me, it was like, well, no one's going to buy Army of Frankenstein's, the script. I'm just going to make it, myself. But then we did make it, and it ended up getting the attention it did, which allowed us to then have that relationship with the sales agent that allowed us to make movies that were closer to what buyers were looking for. And so now it's almost like I would never write a script without having that information beforehand as to what somebody wants. And it's not necessarily that they're giving me a script even as much as like, I know that, for example, a company might be wanting a dragon movie and they're willing to pay a lot for a good dragon movie, but they don't have any idea of like what kind of dragon movie. It's just a dragon movie. So I can then pitch them 5 or 6 different dragon movie ideas, and they can say, yeah, this one will work the best. And then from that idea, I can go ahead and write a screenplay. And they're not necessarily so involved in the screenplay. They just want a good dragon movie with a lot of cool dragon trailer moments. Yeah,
for sure. So one other question, just going back to those early days, these distributors are reaching out to you, and Galen is one, or the sales agents are reaching out to you, and Galen is one of them. Why did you go with Galen over these other 3 or 4 sales agents? What was it about him that you liked?
What I liked about Galen was that he was small at the time. They were small and we were small, and I just felt like that we had a connection when we talked on the phone, that we sort of had the same philosophy on what kind of makes something happen. And he liked the movie, which I know he probably says that about every movie he tries to sign. But but I think that he said something to me that made me want to work with him, and it was, look, we don't just want Army of Frankensteins, we want you guys, and we want to work with you guys on every movie that you do moving forward. And that was a different attitude than I was getting from some of the other agents that were just more like, hey, look, this movie might do okay, so we'll take it with us to the American film market and see if we get any bites. And that was just a lot different from the attitude that Galen came to me with, more of like a partnership attitude. And I knew that they had come from bigger companies, and they were like, we want to make a more filmmaker-friendly company that would be, because you hear lots of stories about sales agents and distributors who take advantage of filmmakers, and not easy. It's easy to do, so, and especially as a filmmaker, you want your stuff out there. So you'll, kind of just sign up for anything. And I think the thing that we've been very fortunate about with High Octane and Galen is that they really did. I mean, everything that they said they were going to do, they did. And, the money came and the opportunities came, and we just kept working together, and it's been great.
Yeah, yeah. So, are there any ideas that are on the horizon? You mentioned like westerns were not hot last year. Now people are looking around for westerns. Are there some things that writers should maybe be thinking about? Some ideas that you're starting to hear from sales agents or something that say, "Hey, these movies are getting hot now." I'm just curious what those things might be.
Well, I can't say exactly what's hot this very moment because, like I said, it changes a lot. I'm no expert in that, but I can tell you there are things that I've been sort of told as generalities. If you're trying to make a movie like this, like a sales movie, you think about, all you really have to do is think about how it translates to another culture. So if you imagine, like, American comedies and dramas don't always translate very well to other cultures because of, well, comedy is easy because jokes that are funny to us make zero sense to somebody in the Philippines or something like that. So I think that's why comedies are a hard sell internationally. Horror and sci-fi always do really well because they, if you think about the concept of dinosaurs eating people, it's very primal. You don't have to necessarily translate that or describe it. That's why horror does well because it's a monster or a guy like chasing a group of people that are secluded. I know Galen always likes those kind of movies. They always do well internationally. So they're always thinking about the international translatability of the movie. So that's something to keep in mind. How do you make the movie look like a Hollywood movie, whether it's the highest production value you can get? If you have CG creatures crumbling buildings or a big giant dinosaur eating somebody and it looks pretty decent, that is worth a lot. If you can pull that off, then you're getting this Hollywood kind of look. And I think the whole idea here is that you're sort of convincing the people that watch this trailer that, hey, this is a Hollywood movie. And if it looks super low budget or really bad, then I think that's potential for less sales. And of course, people on YouTube are going to say everything looks terrible. So I'm not talking about them. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about the people that are buying these movies will look at something like the Jurassic games and say, well, that quality is enough for my audience to think that this is worth buying. So there's that. And so, like, well, why a dinosaur and a giant gremlin monster or something? Well, it's because I don't have the money to put Brad Pitt in my movie or a big recognizable star. So the dinosaur is the star. The gremlin monster is the star. And I remember reading an article about movies without big names in them they weren't being bought by Walmart. And this was around the time that we did Army of Frankensteins, and I was discouraged because I was like, oh no, does this mean Army of Frankensteins isn't going to be in Walmart? And Galen said, what are you talking about? You do have a big star in your movie. I was like, who? And he said, Frankenstein. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the key there is, like, how can you write something into your script that's going to be a big draw without the name? It's like, say you can't get Brad Pitt into your movie. Well, what can you put into your movie that everybody knows and is familiar with and can relate to? And Frankenstein monster is definitely that. A dinosaur is definitely that. So I think that's something to think about, if you're wanting to make a movie like this.
Mm-hmm, for sure. So can you tell us what the release schedule for Jurassic Games is going to be? When is it going to be out, and how can people see it?
It's going to be released on VOD June 12th, and then in streaming June 12th, and then it'll be on DVD in stores and other outlets, Amazon, places like that, on July 3rd, I believe. Yes, July 3rd.
Okay, perfect. What's the best way for people to kind of keep up with what you're doing? Website, blog, Twitter, Facebook, anything you're comfortable sharing, I'll round up for the show notes.
Sure. I mean, if you want to find me on Twitter or Facebook, I'm usually there, Facebook mostly, but it's real easy. It's just Ryan Bellgardt. So there's only one of me that I know of. So RyanBellGardt. So yeah, just shoot me a message on either of those. And I love talking filmmaking with people, and people that, it's funny because sometimes people will send me their ideas or their pitches or their scripts, and at first I was like a little hesitant to pass those along, but Galen was like, heck no, man, I mean, I'm always looking for stuff. So he'll tell you if it's no good, but but if on the chance that it's good, I'll be happy to pass along stuff. So That might be a terrible idea to open that invitation.
Yeah, exactly. You may get 10,000 emails here.
Yeah, I don't know.
So, well, cool. Well, Ryan, I really appreciate this. This has been a great interview. Lots of great information. It's fascinating too to hear someone not in LA, because I get so many emails from people that are not in LA saying, "Hey, can I make a go at this? Am I going to be able to write or direct or produce or something?" And you're living proof that it's possible.
You can. I mean, I say that a lot. I think I've been out to LA a few times, and I've had people out in LA say, "Hey, why aren't you out here doing this?" And I realized kind of then that there's really the only real difference between the people in LA doing it and the people anywhere else doing it is that they're there and we're here. I think there's sort of a little bit of a stigma maybe that, well, I'm just in Oklahoma and I can't do this because the real people doing it are in Los Angeles or California or New York or something. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I mean, I can end with this, and I'll try to keep it PG here, but one of my favorite disses that we get is when people will comment on our trailer or on our movies and say, "I can't believe Hollywood is putting out bleep like this." And I'm like, wow, that's awesome. They thought our movie was a Hollywood movie. And we did it all here in Oklahoma with Oklahoma people, with Oklahoma talent and cast and crew. And that kind of stuff can be done anywhere in any state. And, with the technology that's available today, and, just with the local talent and local film scenes that are going on now, there's absolutely no reason why no one has ever once said, "Oh, well, your movie wasn't made in California, we don't want it." Mm-hmm. I mean, it doesn't matter. If you're making the right kind of movie, it doesn't matter where it was made.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Ryan, again, I really appreciate your time. Congratulations on getting this
Thanks.
film finished. And I look forward to talking to you again soon when you have another film.
Thanks, sir. I sure appreciate you.
Perfect. Thank you, Ryan. We'll talk to you later.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.
I just want to talk quickly about SYS Select. It's a service for screenwriters to help them sell their screenplays and get writing assignments. The first part of the service is the SYS Select Screenplay Database. Screenwriters upload their screenplays along with a logline, synopsis, and other pertinent information like budget and genre, and then producers search for and hopefully find screenplays that they want to produce. Dozens of producers are in the system looking for screenplays right now. I launched this service at the beginning of this year, and we've already started to see some success stories. You can check out SYS podcast episode 222 with Steve Deering. He was the first official success story to come out of the SYS Select database. You can learn more about all of this by going to sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. When you join SYS Select, you get access to the screenplay database that I just mentioned, along with all the other services that we're providing to SYS Select members. Those services include the monthly newsletter that goes out to our list of 400 producers who are actively seeking writers and screenplays. Each SYS Select member can pitch one screenplay in this monthly newsletter. We also have partnered with one of the premier paid screenwriting leads sites, so I can syndicate their leads to SYS Select members. There are lots of great paid leads coming in each week from our partner. Recently, we've been getting 5 to 10 high-quality paid leads per week. These leads run the gamut. There's producers looking for a specific type of spec script to producers looking to hire a screenwriter to write up one of their ideas or properties. They're looking for shorts, they're looking for features, TV and web series pilots, all types of different projects. If you sign up for SYS Select, you'll get these leads emailed directly to you several times per week. Also, you can get access to the SYS Select forum, where we will help you with your logline and query letter and answer any screenwriting related questions that you might have. Also in the forum are all the recorded screenwriting classes that I've done over the years, so you'll have access to all of those as well. The classes cover every part of the writing process, from concept to outlining to the first act, second act, third act, as well as other topics like writing short films and pitching your projects in person. Once again, if this sounds like something you would like to learn more about, please go to sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing writer-director York Alex Shackleton, who just did a feature film called 211 starring Nicolas Cage. We talked through his early years as a professional snowboarder and then doing some edgy documentaries and how he was able to turn those experiences into a career as a feature film director. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. So just to wrap things up, I want to touch on a few things from today's interview with Ryan. There's a number of great lessons here. I thought one thing that was really interesting was Ryan's description of how he got into special effects. So much of creative pursuits, whether it be, writing scripts, making a film, an art project, any of these sort of creative pursuits, so much of it starts just sort of with a curiosity and an interest in learning how to do some of these things. And I think what Ryan did with the special effects, that was such a smart thing to do. He did not become an expert at special effects. He did not become, the guy that's creating high-end special effects, but he learned how to do it on his own in his spare time. Enough that he understood the process, and maybe he wasn't necessarily the best person at it, but by getting that real world experience, actually doing some special effects for a film, super low budget film, he learned the process and probably learned how to pick, good artists and how to find people that really do understand and are really good at that process. And I just think that's so important for everything we are doing. This is a creative pursuit, and it's got to come with just sort of an interest and a curiosity, and the ability just to go out there and just learn in our spare time. That's just a great lesson for all of us, because so much of these projects, and I think this is a good example, is, it's not just about the script. This is a very, special effect. Obviously, it's got, dinosaurs, CGI dinosaurs. So it's such a great sort of marrying of the two skills, screenwriting, all his producing experience, plus, I guess, the three skills, plus this background as well in CGI and computer graphics and special effects and that sort of stuff. So again, any way we can take these low budget projects and sort of combine them with some other talents and skills and stuff, it gives it the effect of being higher budget, of being a bigger studio level type of a film. And I would highly recommend this one. If you're at all interested in sort of sci-fi and effects heavy movies, I would highly recommend checking this one out, because this is really it's a great example of a low budget film that really has a lot of production value and looks really, really good. So if you're at all interested in this kind of film and potentially writing this type of script, again, I would highly recommend checking this out. Really watch it. Look at the details. Look at the script, and look at the details on the special effects, and sort of understand what can be done on a lower budget, and how it's going to ultimately turn out and look. Because again, that can really, really impact your writing and hopefully make it better. If you have some of the same skills and interests. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.